Hi, René here. In this video there is no common thread because oddities and rarities are loners by definition and cannot be classified into categories, but I will try at least to connect them loosely as far as possible. As hi-fi lovers, we are used to hunting for better and better sounding CDs and LPs, but this record has taught me that we can also make use of the content to widen our knowledge horizon instead. I concede at the very beginning that this is not a marvel of recording and sound quality, but its style and content is so unique that we should give it a chance nevertheless. You might be delighted by its sense of musical humor. The title is a clear invitation: Discover America. And what is meant is the America since the early 20s, especially with respect to the Caribbean islands, home of the Calypso music. In Bing Crosby, Van Dyke Parks tells you about the stars of long gone years, stars like Lawrence Tibbett, Nelson Eddy, Donald Wobis, Morton Downey, Kenny Baker, and Rudy Vallee, but puts Bing Crosby above all of them. The Four Mills Brothers is a praise of this jazz and pop formation, who were the very first black quartet to take the American entertainment market by storm. FDR in Trinidad admiringly talks about Franklin D. Roosevelt and his political importance for Cuba and the Caribbean islands. And G-Man Hoover spotlights the historical personality of J. Edgar Hoover. The song Riverboat, by the way, seems to have been a predecessor of Proud Mary, at least to my ears. Maybe Ike Turner stole at least some notes from it and nobody ever noticed it. Furthermore, Van Dyke Parks praises Trinidad and Tobago. Last but not least, the whole project is nothing but an homage to the Caribbean steel band music. Let me wind up with an example of a very early steel band music LP from 1959. You know La Paloma, don't you? If you are curious to hear how it sounds when played on steel drums, you should open this YouTube video. For me, at least, it is great fun once in a while to listen to La Paloma from this LP. In the 70s already, the first sign of fatigue was showing up after the dominance of the music style created by the Beatles and Stones and their imitators. And there was a search for ways to go beyond the run-of-the-mill, and that was the idea of adding ethnic and orchestral elements. The Beatles themselves had sown the seeds at a very early stage with their song Yesterday. So it was no surprise when in the early 80s the London Symphony Orchestra recorded rock symphonies, and presented lots of orchestral adaptations of numerous successful pop hits. There was even a formation of 12 cello players from the Berlin Philharmonics who recorded, among others, this LP, The Beatles in Classic. Years later, Peter Breiner, with his chamber orchestra, came out with The Beatles Go Baroque. And as I mentioned the steel bands at the beginning of this video, I don't want to withhold from you this version here of the Beatles song Something from their 1969 album Abbey Road, played by the Esso Steel Band. I know that from a musical standpoint all this is a dubious venture, but it can at least provide a few entertaining hours full of surprises and amusement. Spectacular early experiments were, for example, Led Zeppelin's Kashmir from their 1975 release Physical Graffiti and John Lord's Sarabande with the Philharmonica Hungarica from 1975 as well. What a pity for that beautiful project, because the sound is flat like the vinyl disc and almost annihilates the grand orchestral effort. In 1976, Tarantelle, this LP by Gregorio Paniagua with his Atrium Musica from Madrid, appeared in the catalogue of Harmonia Mundi. Great recording work, really stupendous sound, but the many short titles on it don't provide much of musical enjoyment and are rather a means for testing your components if they are able to reproduce the sounds of medieval instruments. The same can be said of La Folia de la España, which was released in 1980, and sound-wise is even more sophisticated and also more daring when it hyper-realistically renders the sound of church bells, of an old car leaving and coming back, applying a rusty handbrake and sounding an old-fashioned horn, and the bombshell is the staggering raging of a big engine being switched on. This is not only a curiosity in the history of high-end recordings, it is straightforward unique. When I display my LPs by Andreas Vollenweider, I probably carry coal to Newcastle, but just in case you somehow managed to overlook his work, here are 3 of his most famous works: Behind the Gardens, Caverna Magica, and White Winds. A harp in pop music certainly was weird in those times. Nowadays we are used to or even overfed with such combinations because of the permanent experiments in the field of fusion music. If you like the sound of the harp more or less as a solo instrument, you can listen to Neues aus Harfistan, which could be translated into Novelties from Harp Land, and is the blues-imbued theme melody, and other playful tracks by Rüdiger Oppermann, most of all to his composition for 5 Tea Drinkers. If you like going back to the early roots of harp music, why not try it with harp music from the Middle Ages? Here is a sample of the French composer Gautier de Coincy, Ma Vielle. This album offers fusion sounds of the famous tabla player Zakir Hussain, cooperating with British jazz rock guitarist John McLaughlin, who became famous with his Mahavishnu Orchestra, and the Norwegian jazz musician Jan Gabarek. The music sometimes sounds more Indian, like in the theme title, Making Music, then again tends towards jazz, like in You and Me. My personal favorite is Water Girl because of the fascinating sound of the water drum. Anyway, I always prefer to drink from the unspoiled and undiluted well, like in the case of this LP, Jiv Kalyan Racha from 1974. I have chosen 2 tracks for you which are available on YouTube, Anandavan Bhuvani and the Marathi song. Really impressive and heart-touching devotional songs. Stemming from India's neighbor country Iran is Ali Aka Alexander Rahbari, the composer of symphonic poetry of Persia. He melted and mixed wonderful melodies from his country with classical occidental music, but the recording quality by Colosseum, a label from Nuremberg, is a real shame. The thin and undynamic sound squanders the magic and power of this interesting work. With Rahbari, I have found the bridge to classic music, and I can casually talk about this CD from the Lockenhaus edition. From this entertaining disc with its title Encore, I recommend 3 pieces. Track 1, which is a funny miniature concert for double swing trio, including rock and roll tunes, Sofia Gubaidulina's funny waltz aria Walzerspaß, and a travesty of a Haydn quartet in which the leading violinist obstinately is thrown off track by his love for popular tunes, but somehow manages to elegantly get back to the original score of the Haydn quartet. This never fails to make me laugh. And in the future, probably you too. Give it a try. See you.